I think it's up to me to say thank you to AnthroStrike for your amazing actions and your great program of teachings, and I'm very, very honoured to be here and talking with you, especially standing right here on a picket line. And it so happens that I have the talk that is the most applicable talk for this picket line, since it really is. And we just lost Stephen Hawking with A Brief History of Time. So this is a brief history of the picket line, actually. So let's go with that. Okay, and this talk also was mobilized because I noticed that David Graeber and Wengrow last week were talking on the subject of social inequality and attacking the idea that they think is a myth that human society began egalitarian amongst hunter-gatherers, and then it slid downhill onto this road of social inequality with farmers and civilization. Okay, and they don't like that story. They consider it's a myth. But I'm concerned that they may be replacing that story with another myth. And I think it's important to have the evolutionary perspective on this, which they were not really dealing with. There has been this century, I'm not sure if you're like evolutionary or social anthropologists in the main. I think most of you may be social side. But in this century, there has actually been an extraordinary feminist turn in evolutionary anthropology. We start with the grandmothering hypothesis, just at the turn of the century, culminating with Sarah Hrdy's cooperative childcare hypothesis for the evolution of emotional modernity, as she puts it. We have partible paternity, which undermines the concept that there has to be like one man as the definite husband and father of any woman's children. And there's also been an attack on the old idea that hunter-gatherers have patrilocal bands with women moving to where the men are, and that has been completely dismantled. In addition to that, I and my colleagues have been working on the importance of female strategies in the emergence of symbolic culture and language itself. So what we're seeing is female perspectives, female strategies being placed centrally to the evolution of modern humans. So the old man, the hunter ideas are just being overshadowed by hardworking grandmas, babysitting apes, children with more than one daddy. So it's just sweeping the old narratives away pretty well. And so I'm going to make an argument that not only is gender of importance, but gender and the egalitarianism in terms of gender, a balance of power between the sexes, was really what made us human and was critical to that. Okay, so I'm just going to say a few words about where the differences lie between me and Graeber and Wengrow, and why I've sort of had some trouble with some of their arguments. If they restrict themselves on the origins of inequality to a picture of the Upper Paleolithic of 40,000, actually they deal really with 30,000 years of evidence, and talk about the onset of farming and civilization in respect of that, I don't really have a problem. But I'm not sure that they're not talking about human origins. It's very confusing, and in the article they just published in Eurozyne, an online magazine, they have a stand first that we have been telling ourselves the wrong story about our origins. So that would seem to be that putting it out to a lay audience, they're talking in terms of human origins. So is it just the past 30,000 years, or are they making statements about, well, actually humans have always had war, they've always had inequality as well as some levels of equality and resistance? That would seem to me to be making statements about origins. So I'm just going to make clear why they're actually disqualified from talking about the origins of modern humans, which is a time frame going back 300 to 200,000 years, for these reasons. They don't have any evolutionary context at all. Now, I've heard David Graeber in political meetings, or I've been in the same political meetings with him, talking about the way that capitalism parasitizes and preys upon our instincts for cooperation. We are fundamentally communistic in our willingness to assist each other, just instinctively. And capitalism uses that for its own evil purposes. So that I believe, David's absolutely right, it's absolutely true. But doesn't he wish to explain that? Doesn't he want to understand where on earth this came from? Because Darwinian evolution does not give this level of cooperation for nothing. It doesn't produce it. We haven't got any other examples of that sort of level of what can be called hyper-sociality or hyper-cooperation. What we can do that no other complex social mammal can do is cooperate with strangers, people that we've never actually met before and may never meet again. And this is something, it is just not, it's just not really known in a Darwinian world. So that's a puzzle. It's something that needs explaining. So that has been a puzzle that evolutionary anthropologists have been looking at. Wenger and Graeber also do not deal with sex and gender, not in any serious way. And that's probably wise, because if they're not dealing with evolution, they won't have traction on that. But it clearly must be, I mean, surely if we're talking about egalitarianism or if we're talking about inequality, either of those things, then sex and gender must be at the heart of the discussion. It can't just be an add-on to the discussion. The other thing that they leave out is Africa. And nearly all their discussion in that article concerns Eurasia, Europe, the Upper Paleolithic. Now, in the bad old days, in the 80s and 90s, when people talked about the human revolution, they would focus on just the evidence in the Upper Paleolithic of Europe. But in the last 20 years, we've had this intensive study of the archaeology of Africa in respect of modern humans. And it is just, this is the continent on which we evolved. We're Africans. We're from that origin. We have been modern humans in Africa at least 2 to 3 times as long as any other place on Earth. So you can't. The one continent you cannot leave out is Africa. And in fact, you can focus on origins alone in Africa. So I'm saying that they really aren't talking about human origins. I'm going to take them at their word, and on that ground, I can, go with the models that they've got for the Upper Paleolithic. That's very interesting. But I'm suggesting that the actual interesting or fundamental question is not so much how do we get to be unequal as this: how do we become equal? And if we don't answer that question, I'm not sure we can get to the second question. So I'm going to focus on this issue of equality. And I'm going to say something about how do we think of gender egalitarianism amongst hunter-gatherer anthropologists. There has been a feminist anthropology in the past that denied, and thinking of the old articles by people like Sherry Ortner, that suggested women always in every culture are second-class citizens. There's a pan-cultural fact of women's oppression. And yet, amongst hunter-gatherers, many people discuss and describe gender egalitarianism, and this is becoming very well documented. Now, we know from people like James Woodburn in their discussions of egalitarianism amongst immediate return societies, societies that have no storage, where there is no differential of rank because nobody has more property than anybody else. Egalitarianism is assertive. It's not given. It's not like everybody's you're right, you've got equal rights. You've got to stick up for yourself. You've got to keep watch that nobody else is trying to, put one over. You maintain, you do that by demand sharing, by making sure that things get shared, resources get shared. You ask for and you get given. People are autonomous in these immediate return societies. Nobody, not any man, no woman, no child, can be told by anybody what to do. People make their own decisions. Nobody has a power of coercion, and that's definitely true for women. Agency and decision making, people make their own decisions, decide where they're going to live, who they're going to live with. women especially, but almost every member of society, even to young children, to fairly young children, have economic independence. Nobody can claim, hog resources or prevent them from accessing resources. Women make their own living. And control over sexual and reproductive life is obviously of major importance for women. Now, feminist anthropology, and indeed David Graeber in some of his discussions, for instance in Fragments of Anarchist Anthropology, have focused on difference in sex roles and sex division of labour as a place where hierarchy enters. And feminists have often made arguments in terms of hunter-gatherers. They've said, well, actually, we can find hunter-gatherers where there are women hunting. But anyway, isn't women's gathering just as important as the hunting? It produces just as many goods and as much actual economic contribution. However, difference in roles, having difference in roles of sex division of labour is not generally, certainly not amongst African hunter-gatherers, hierarchical necessarily. It is not necessary to be the same, to be all doing the same thing, to be valued the same. In fact, diversity is of enormous importance for hunter-gatherers, for the reason that if you're in a hunter-gatherer camp, you don't want every person to do the same thing. You want them to be gathering diverse and different resources and producing different things. So we can have difference, but not necessarily hierarchy, and models of interdependence. Men's hunting actually is the equivalent for men's hunting amongst women is not so much gathering as reproduction, giving birth. And there are many symbolic connections between the sequences of hunting and the sequences of a woman's pregnancy and birth giving. One of the keys, so this issue of reproductive taboos, the taboos on women's reproduction are also impinging on men's production. Now, feminists, again, have talked about reproductive taboos, particularly focused on menstrual taboos, and as soon as they're seeing menstrual taboos, assuming, well, that must be some sort of degradation or diminishment of females, of women. And whilst it is true that the reproductive taboos and menstrual taboos have significant potency, and they are very central in hunter-gatherer cosmologies, the idea that they involve some kind of debasement of women or placing women into control or coercion, or what's known as pollution, this does not apply for hunter-gatherers at all. I don't think pollution is a good concept actually generally in anthropology for menstruation as such. I think that's something that's been imported by anthropologists from their generally Christian heritage. But amongst hunter-gatherers, reproductive taboos link together the actions of men hunting and the actions of women in menstruation, pregnancy, and childbirth in what have been termed ideologies of blood. These symbols intertwine and create a kind of equivalence and interdependence, and they are the concepts that cover these are critical for the cultures concerned. They're the central concepts of power of the cultures concerned. Jerome Lewis here in this department, Ekila, he's documented and demonstrated the enormous importance of Ekila. Rom, which belongs to Jeune Kwasi of the Kalahari, is a concept that covers both the girl's menstruation and her potency and healing potency of a trance dance. Epemez Hadza concept. Again, this is a central ritual practice and connected to female menstruation. Just a few more points from Frank Marlowe, the leading evolutionary ecologist who's worked with the Hadza of Tanzania, one of the key examples of immediate return hunter-gatherers that have been used. Well, Marlowe has been taught an enormous amount by the Hadza concerning our evolution, including about the hard-working grandmothers. but he worked with, but he tried to identify from a sample of hunter-gatherers, which he identified as warm climate, non-equestrian hunter-gatherers, the most relevant sample for human evolution. What were the main factors that were influencing egalitarianism specifically? Mobility is of enormous importance, and especially for women. We know from case studies from Kalahari, from the Hadza actually, and from Central Africa, when women are kind of forced into settlement, when they cannot move so easily to their friends, their kin, this is very undermining of their freedom, their ability to maintain autonomy. Multi-local residence is a key issue here. Marlowe's amongst those, including people in this department, Mark Dibley and Ruth Mace, Andrea Miliano, who have shown that the old ideas about patrilocal residence with hunter-gatherers are just their old ideas that never were justified. Multi-local residence implies that people can live where they want to live. They can go and live with whoever it is they want to. But what tends to happen in life history is that a woman stays with her mother. At the beginning, when she's starting to have children, she's with her mother. Her husband or her mate will come and stay where she is in her camp and do what's known as bride service. So this multi-local residence should be seen as, it starts off as matrilocal. And then again, this issue of large game, because feminists, again, feminist anthropologists have sometimes tended to see hunting of large game animals, which is of course a big main feature of African hunter-gatherers, as being somehow that means, oh, the bigger the game animal, the bigger the prestige for the man, surely women are suffering by comparison with that. As we can see with these hunters who are coming back with their beautiful hemsbok across the blistering heat of the Kalahari, they are not oppressing women or children by bringing back all this large amount of meat and energy and nutrients all the way back to the camp. Having large game animals produced for them by men in this way is something that supports and helps women's reproduction, women's childcare, and has been very important in the story of human evolution. So these are aspects of this sort of, the factors of equality for gendered, for hunter-gatherers, the aspects of gender. So what I want to do is show what evidence there is in human evolution of increasing egalitarianism from the origins of genus Homo, effectively. So I'll do that over a longer time period, but particularly focus on the more recent time period. And why did that have to be emphatically gender egalitarian? Okay, so let's just say what areas of evidence are. They come from our species biology, our life history, our evolved psychology. This is the main solid evidence for this. And that incorporates Sarah Hurdy's material on cooperative childcare as the basis for what's known as intersubjectivity. As the main marker of that, so the marker of egalitarianism on our bodies are specifically cooperative eyes. Life history features grandmothering, the menopause, the importance of grandmothering, and childhood as specific life history features that are human, Homo sapiens in particular. Our brain sizes are in themselves, of very large brain sizes, 3 to 4 times the size of chimpanzee brains are themselves. We wouldn't have these brain sizes without egalitarianism. Aspects of sexual physiology, and what can be said to be, I mean, it's what David Graeber's observed, our non-submissive psychology, what's been called by Edmund Leach, for instance. We're criminals by instinct. We will resist anybody's attempts to coerce us. So that area of evidence is a whole body that it's converging in one direction. We can't really explain all this, unless we argue that there was a prolonged period that our ancestors, specifically the ancestors of Homo sapiens, were going through basically increasing amounts of egalitarianism, maxing out as we became modern human. And I'm going to look some at the ethnography of African hunter-gatherers for examples of what are known as counter-dominance and reverse dominance in action. And these are particularly female strategic. I won't spend very much time, but I'll give a glimpse of archaeology because unlike what Wengrow and Graeber were suggesting, there actually is some archaeological evidence before the Upper Paleolithic because it's African, of course. So Sarah Hrdy and Mothers and Others is simply the finest book on human evolution of this century. And if you want to get any knowledge of it, you should get this book and take a look. And she posits that, you know, she's really trying to define what makes us different from the other African apes. And she can nail it down to this specifically. We do babysitting. We are the babysitting ape. No other African ape mother, a chimp or a bonobo or gorilla, can give their baby to another. They're simply not prepared to do that. The mothers are hyper-possessive. They hang on to their children for the reason that they just can't trust. They have nobody that is trustworthy enough that can take hold of their child, that they're willing to let them. And this is simply down to the fact that they do not live, generally speaking, chimps and gorillas and bonobos are not living with their female relatives. They don't have somebody sufficiently trustworthy because they do not have female kin. So babysitting ape implies monkeys do plenty of babysitting. They do babysitting because they do live with female kin. Babysitting ape implies that we did. Almost surely going back to origins of genus Homo, at least, if not could be argued earlier. But now what Sarah Hrdy's saying happens just out of the simple situation of mother handing over child to another carer, and the obvious candidate to start this process off as an evolutionary process is mother's mother. This is the first person that she's going to trust, and this takes the form then of Kristen Hawkes' grandmother hypothesis. But as soon as that child has gone into the arms of another, then a strange thing is now set up in terms of that will lead to a sort of feedback that is going to lead to what is known as intersubjectivity. So the baby is watching, where's mum, and watching at the carer, and how are you going to be, you know, how are you with me? And the carer is looking at baby and starting to make little faces or you know, stick a tongue out and try and coo-coo at them. And mum is watching carer. And so this triangle is now starting to invite each member of the triangle, each partnership is trying to invite the other into their thoughts and give their thoughts and feelings to the other and probe and investigate. What are you feeling like? Look at, you know, what do you think of me? How, I mean, what? And this is a process that just doesn't happen amongst other great apes. Great apes are very interested in understanding what other apes are thinking and what they're going to do, but they don't want to let those other individuals know what they're thinking. It's like a one-way process. But this intersubjectivity, as it's known, it sets up what is called mutual mind reading, and the basis of what Sarah Hrdy calls emotional modernity. Okay. So this is the first step, and it's right at the beginning of genus Homo, and with Homo erectus that we have this. Now, but this is just in support of the fact that African hunter-gatherers their marriage and residence patterns definitely display a tendency for mothers and daughters to live together, particularly when daughters are having their first children. So it's like it descends from female kin bonding in genus Homo. But if we think now about intersubjectivity, we have this marker of our bodies. I mean, it's like the brand of egalitarianism in our bodies. We have what are known as cooperative eyes. And this is to show the real difference physical difference, physiological difference in the faces of ourselves and all these great apes. And these are all juvenile great apes of different species, bonobos and chimps and gorillas. And you can see what their eyes are all like. And this is true of all the over 230 species of primates. Apart from us, we're the only ones different. Their eyes are round. Their eyes are dark, basic, dark background, sometimes a little bit less dark than others. But by contrast, all human beings have this elongated shape of the eye with the very white, bright sclera and the dark iris. And immediately what that does is it's showing very clearly to anybody looking, it's like inviting anybody who's looking into what you're interested in, because you're looking at people's eyes, you're looking into, are they paying attention, are they looking at what, can you see, Mariam, what I'm seeing? And we just measure it. Are you thinking the same thing I'm thinking? We're linking up to each other in ways that these guys simply aren't. We can characterize, even though these are juvenile apes, we can characterize them as like mafia wearing sunglasses. They want to see, they want to watch what the other guys are doing, but they don't want the other guys to know what they're doing. So this is like, we can't imagine that the evolution of an eye like this, unless you're in a situation of egalitarianism, horizontality, relatively friendly and egalitarian, you cannot imagine this giving away your thoughts to somebody who's dominant to you, who's likely to hurt you, hit you, coerce you. It's just not possible. So this is one of the most important aspects of indicators of egalitarianism. And we can start to think about, well, when did those cooperative eyes evolve? Presumably in relation to Sarah Hrdy's cooperative breeding matrix, which she puts back into the early genus, like Homo erectus as the likely starting point. And I think there's a lot of grounds for that argument. But I just want to take you to Andy Whiten's interpretation of intersubjectivity. Deep social mind is the way that he talked about it, by which he means the mind reading, which is mutual mind reading, meshing mental states. Andy Whiten is famous for the early version of the social brain hypothesis known as Machiavellian intelligence. But what he did with Machiavellian intelligence, so this is the idea that the evolution of intelligence amongst primates has been because of the social problems, the problems of social negotiation and alliances. But Whiten made an argument that increasing Machiavellian intelligence, which is correlated to increasing brain sizes, increasing Machiavellian intelligence enables you to make more alliances, negotiate with your mates and allies, and that makes it much harder for any opponent to dominate you, because you can always muster an alliance. So the more you are Machiavellian intelligence, the more that you can create coalitions and alliances, the more that dominance becomes a kind of passé strategy. So the greater the Machiavellian, this is very dialectical, the greater the Machiavellian intelligence, which is kind of competitive, you're competing by cooperating to keep your edge, your competitive edge in the Darwinian world. The more you do that, the more you've got to settle instead for rough egalitarianism, because you can't dominate others, they can put an alliance against you, but instead of that you just want to make sure they are not going to dominate you. So you just develop an attitude of, don't mess with me, we will, counter-dominance is how he termed it. So he was trying to solve, with David Erdl, he was trying to solve this problem of egalitarianism. The interesting thing is that it's Darwinians, evolutionary anthropologists, who've looked at egalitarianism and thought, well, that's rare in a Darwinian world. How do we explain it? So they've got this little chart. It's only a kind of sketch, a kind of model of back in evolutionary time with the great ape ancestors. We are very hierarchical. But at some point of human evolution, this goes right down. This goes downwards, downwards, downwards to less and less hierarchy, much more egalitarian, to a point where it's bottoming out. He doesn't really know exactly where that is, but we suppose that's coming with modern humans. And then this bit, this is the bit that Wenger and Graeber really don't like. They don't like this bit because that is coming into, this is prehistory, this is coming into history with the advent of agriculture and civilization and zooming back up to hierarchies there. But so this is hunter-gatherer background and yeah. So where do our cooperative eyes have to be starting to evolve in, and Herdes cooperative breeding has to be starting to, as this starts going much, much more egalitarian. So with deep social mind, really this is the same idea as intersubjectivity, but Whiten introduces the political aspect of egalitarianism to it, that mutual mind reading, egalitarianism, and the ability to transmit culture will be all wrapped up in each other. You can't have one without the other two, fundamentally. So if you think about teaching and learning, that is facilitated by the fact that you have rough egalitarianism, you've got some sort of parity of status, and you're able to look each other into the eyes, you're able to read each other's thoughts. That obviously makes sense. Okay, so now, this is really our story. I mean, after the eyes, it is this extraordinary increase, these steps of increase of brain size, which especially is the story of human evolution, and which has to be gendered because you may not all be aware of this, but as brain volumes increase extraordinarily, so from a chimp-sized brain, and these are Australopithecine ancestors, twice the chimpanzee volume, 3 times the chimpanzee volume, and still going upwards within the last 500,000 years. We've actually come down a bit. We're more like round about there at this stage, but it was peaking right at the time of becoming modern human at 1500 odd CC. This is so expensive. It is just, brain tissue is the most expensive tissue of human body with other expensive organs. And 10 times on average more expensive to maintain metabolically than any other tissue of the body, than like muscle tissue, for instance. And the point here is that for mothers to raise very large brained offspring, they must produce that energy. They have to. There's no choice. They've got to do it concretely. So the story of human evolution is really how on earth did those mothers get this energy to produce this? This is an absolutely phenomenal increase within a very short period. It doesn't look that short. Geologically, it's a very, very short period of time. Now, in conjunction with Sarah Herdes' cooperative breeding model, Sarah Herdes is suggesting that it's origin of genus Homo, so these white here, who are jumping twice the level of chimpanzee brain size where cooperative breeding must start. But this has really been proved with Karen Isler and Carol van Schaik, because they are arguing that what is it that constrains the great ape? All the great apes are here, all the robust Australopithecines are here, all the, they're basically, there's a ceiling, there's what's known as a grey ceiling. They can't go through it because the mother has to do everything by herself. For a chimpanzee mother or any ape mother, an orangutan mother, males are worse than useless. They're actually a danger to offspring life. Females can be threatening too. She's doing everything herself. Somehow we bust through. We just broke right through and then went on and broke right through again. And this is only possible because mothers have others to help. Mothers, the supportive cooperative breeding network. So this is constraining where Sarah Herdes' emotional modernity and then the cooperative eyes, they have to be coming here. They've got to be. To start that off with grandmothering, with and presumably male domestication into that cooperative breeding matrix as well. We could talk about which males would be the ones. But then there's this still going up. And if we just take it, well, I'm going to say how that, we've got this still, after twice the brain size, still again, in the last 500,000 or just over 500,000 years, the ancestors of ourselves and the Neanderthals. And as I say, this is specifically gendered. It's posed on females. Females have to find that energy, so where's it coming from? Well, the best guess is that the leisured sex, males who have far less actual burden in reproduction, are going to be providing significantly some energy and subsidy to females. As that brain size is increasing, there's a sort of feedback, there's a sort of dangerous feedback circle going on here for females. The females are having to use Machiavellian intelligence, which is a selection pressure increasing brain sizes, to organize their alliances, to maintain egalitarianism against dominance, against potential male dominance. But as they do that, they're producing larger and larger brained offspring. The males themselves are gaining larger brains that mean that the alliances are more and more difficult to kind of fuel. So there's sort of a feedback cycle here, which may explain why the brain size is rising so fast. It's a kind of vicious circle that comes out at a plateau that may be a virtuous outcome. And somehow, I've tried to track here, there must be egalitarianism correlating with the support structures that females require to produce these extraordinary increases of brain size. So somehow a line that tracks how much dominance, that U-shaped curve they were trying to draw before, has got to correlate with, it's got to be a sort of negative correlation with the actual brain size increase. So our maxing out, our bottoming out of egalitarianism in relation to modern humans of the last 200,000 to 300,000 years is as the brain size approaches and maxes out. It's kind of got to be that. And this is because male dominance is being eliminated as much as possible. The reduction of variance amongst males must be eliminated because females need as many males as possible to be part of the system of producing, of economic production and supplying for them and their children. Okay, so the way that females do this is again part of our body, part of our biology, that is again showing our sexual signals are leveling, they are reducing, they tend to reduce male reproductive variance. And we are beautifully designed with our sexual signals to waste the time of males. So how do we do it? We just don't give the game away. We have concealed an unpredictable ovulation. You can check this out with your boyfriends. You can check it out with your girlfriends if you like. Concealed and unpredictable ovulation, continuous sexual receptivity. As a part of the whole cycle, we have more proportionate continual receptivity than any other primate, even those bonobos. And what the result of that is that males are confused. They have, the information to them is scrambled about precisely when is any female likely to be fertile. Males are just not, men are just not very good at working that out. They try, of course they try, but they're not very good at it. So what does that do? Well, if males are useful, if they can do something useful, which hopefully they can, which might be put up shelves, go to IKEA or whatever, it keeps them hanging around, okay? And that means if you've got one male hanging around and guessing about, your mate hanging around and guessing, well, and no male is very easily going to be able to monopolize one female and then another female and another. It's very hard for a male to maintain a harem. And the thing that these females who have this very steep increase of brain size need is to undermine any male being dominant and able to control harems of females at the expense of other males. They want. So this is beautifully expressed amongst Bayaka, African hunter-gatherers, as recorded by Jerome Lewis in this department. I don't know if he talked to you about it on Monday. One woman, one penis is the cry from the Bayaka, and this is a beautiful expression of not just egalitarianism, but reproductive egalitarianism, which is, in Darwinian terms, the best it gets. Now, notice that is not one woman tied to the same penis. It's one woman, one penis, good ratio there. And this, that is a real live rallying cry of hunter-gatherer women used in ritual performances, used as their kind of slogan, if you like, slogan of resistance. Okay, so we've talked so far about physiology, about, I haven't exactly said much about life history, grandmothering and children, but cooperative eyes, intersubjectivity, psychology of intersubjectivity, sexual physiology, and all these brain science and all these aspects, all these biological aspects, we cannot really explain them without going through a kind of funnel of an evolutionary prolonged period in the emergence of modern humans of egalitarianism. But above all, how we became symbolic and language-speaking modern humans, again, it rests on, I'd say there are two conditions. One, female kin bonding, or female philopatry as it's sometimes called. Two, egalitarianism. And I'm now just going to point to a few social anthropologists, including David Graeber himself, a few social anthropologists who have noticed this, that really symbolism, dominance relations cannot be consonant with the emergence of use of symbolic communication. It's just not going to happen, and it is why our forms of linguistic communication are completely different, completely distinct from any form of primate communication. Primates have a lot of sophisticated communication, gestural and vocal, but it's nothing linguistic. Marshall Sahlins, in the old days when he used to make comparisons between primates and hunter-gatherers, this is a long time ago now, because he doesn't do it anymore, talked about culture being the oldest equalizer. And he says, among animals capable of symbolic communication, the weak can collectively connive to overthrow the strong. But we know, I would kind of turn that around, because we know with Machiavellian, if we take Andrew Whiten's Machiavellian intelligence, it's through the capacity of weaker individuals creating alliances that they can overthrow the strong, and then symbolic communication may become valid. Strong individuals don't need symbolic communication. They don't need to understand your mental states or your thoughts, and nobody has said it better than David Graeber. And here he is, David Graeber from Fragments of Anarchist Anthropology, writing on the subject of state and bureaucracy. And he says, if you've got the power to hit people over the head whenever you want, you don't have to trouble yourself too much figuring out what they think is going on, and therefore, generally speaking, you don't. Okay? So you're not going to evolve language that way. You can only evolve something like linguistic communication if you've actually got relative egalitarianism. Again, you're just the same reasons as intersubjectivity, able to look at each other in the eye. Yeah, and we could go further into that quote, which is quite interesting little quote. It's a nice little quote.
Can we read out the rest of it?
Okay. So you don't. If you can hit, if you've got the power to hit, you don't figure out what they think is going on. Therefore, generally speaking, you don't. Hence, the surefire way to simplify social arrangements, to ignore the incredibly complex play of perspectives, passions, insights, desires. It's all about intersubjectivity, obviously. And mutual understandings that human life is really made of, is to make a rule and threaten to attack anyone who breaks it. Now, the only thing is, it's beautiful, except that if you're in this situation, you won't be the one who makes, you won't be making rules, because if you are in that situation as a dominant great ape or dominant hominin, you don't need rules. The people who actually need rules will be the ones who are weaker, the ones who need the symbolic communication. Fundamentally, of course, women, in terms of rules against rape or rules against coercion of any description, women and children. Okay. So with, I'm wondering how much time I should go on for. Let me just take through Boehm, and I can get to the history of the picket line with this. Boehm's hierarchy in the forest proposed, as well as beyond what's been called counter-dominance. Counter-dominance is a very Machiavellian, Darwinian, one-on-one kind of don't you dominate me and we'll get on fine. And it doesn't really produce a collective perspective. But Bohm's reverse dominance, so this is another Darwinian working away at the problem of not just egalitarianism, but also morality itself. Okay? And so he's going back to primate politics and primate coalitions, and he observes that, well, for primates, you've got two types of alliances. Alliances that are dominant animals ganging together to maintain the status quo and maintain dominance. But then there are alliances which resist dominance, coming up from below, where the beta and gamma animals, or they could also be females potentially in some situations, are gathering together to overthrow animals that are dominant. Now, Bohm is suggesting this, that if that goes far enough, if you can create a coalition of everybody against anyone that's trying to dominate, then we get a situation that he calls reverse dominance. There's a kind of plan by everybody, a collective intention of everybody to overthrow any one dominant individual, and this is essentially generating morality. It's a wholesale coalition of everybody against the alpha, whoever that alpha might be. Call him Donald Trump, perhaps. Bohm's model is just a bit abstract. You know, who exactly are those alphas? Why are they alpha? What are they doing that makes them so obnoxious? Who are the rebels in this situation? Why are these patterns of behavior as an evolutionary process getting repeated as strategies? What's happening with this? And fundamentally what Bohm does is leaves out gender. Again, the question is, surely gender is going to be part of it. Surely sex and gender are going to be part of this. So I'm going to try and use Bohm's template of reverse dominance, but I'm going to try and put the gender in, and we'll come out with something that gives us a picket line. So I'm back to my sexual signals again, which we said was time wasting males' time and leveling them out and stopping them from getting too many harems organized. So we're very well designed for all that. We've got our concealed ovulation, continuous receptivity, scrambling the informations about moments of fertility, but the trouble is that we give away a signal which really is a big giveaway. And that's the problem. This is why menstruation matters so much. In a Darwinian world, is enormously important. And menstruation has an evolutionary history, which I'm not going to go into now, but I'm just thinking of menstruation as a signal, as that it can be read as a cue or a signal. And if one female is menstruating when other females are pregnant or lactating or menopausal and not cycling, the female who's menstruating, that is a very reliable cue that she's not pregnant now, but that means that in a week or two, she is the one. You know, she's the one that any male in the vicinity would bring her flowers and chocolates, and she's the one to get to know, because she can be made pregnant in the near future. And in a Darwinian world, it's not possible for any male to ignore that. They've got to be interested in that. So menstruation potentially, well, it's the cause of conflict. And I'm just going to take you through this model that then will generate our picket line. If we just take, this is going very, very swiftly through. So if you just take this, menstruation causes conflict. It causes conflict amongst the females potentially, because, okay, this might be the friend and relative of these other women, but those women they're breastfeeding, they're pregnant, they need the energy, hopefully being provided to some extent by males, and this female is the one that's attracting all the attention. So she's potentially going to undercut their investment. All these males who may need to be in, you know, they're going to be in big competition potentially against each other. They're going to be in conflict against each other if they have the prospect of there's a menstruating female that we could try to, compete for. So menstruation immediately causes tensions and conflicts. It's something that has to be in some way resolved. This process will happen again and again. It's an evolutionary situation. It's a situation which will arise again and again in evolution of hominins, and in many hominin species probably, where there's concealed ovulation, but certainly in our ancestors, with concealed ovulation and the signal of menstruation, this must happen. So long as the brain size is relatively steady with Homo erectus and the 2 times kind of chimpanzee levels, maybe they can just fudge it and get through it, and maybe some of the males will be able to dominate and monopolize some of the fertility as a result of that. But when the brain size goes kicking up, so for the material reproductive stress on females is really increasing, this becomes a female problem, and females have got to solve that problem. So we've made the argument with the female cosmetic coalitions that this is how it'll run out. This is the process that will, I'm not saying that every single time it works like this, but eventually it starts working like this. First of all, those women need to kind of grab the girl. They need to make sure she's okay. She's not going to get taken off by somebody on safari. They need to get hold of her, take control of her. She's their friend or relative, maybe. So they want to hang on to her. They could try and hide menstruation, which is a bit like hiding ovulation. But the best thing to do is not that. The best thing to do will be to join in, create an amplified signal where everybody is part of this signal. Everybody is saying we're together in this. And there you do have your picket line. That picket line is resistant against any dominant alpha male taking hold, grabbing, picking and choosing between a female who's menstruating and a female who's not. And they're just saying with the performance, with the whole demonstration of cosmetics, we're all menstruating here, we're all together in this coalition, we're in solidarity, we're inviolable. We now start to get these concepts of their arising of taboo, inviolability, potency. The other important thing to say is that amongst these males, really, so long as the males are willing to invest and to support the females, as against a male who just wants to go in there as a dominant, the Donald Trump strategy, grab the pussy, all those other males will be on the side of the females. Because if they're investing in females, they want to know that those females are not interested in the dominant males, in the alpha males who aren't going to give them any investment. So by signaling like this, by putting out this show of our alliance in solidarity, we are looking after that girl. If you want to, bring supplies for our coalition, it's for everybody. It's not for just her. They are showing we're not dealing with alpha males. We're not dealing with males who are not prepared to do bride service, who are not going to provide for the coalition. The investor males will be on their side. We now have Boehm's reverse dominance coalition of everybody against the alpha. Even the males themselves will be drawn into this. By the females' solidarity, they are ensuring the males' solidarity, the solidarity amongst the males, and it rests on the females' definite cooperation that the males will themselves cooperate. So this is our birthplace for morality in the picket line, fundamentally. And if we just say something very quickly, maybe I should end up in the next little while. I haven't been able to get to my hunter-gatherers. I'd like to show one or two things. The female cosmetic coalitions, or sex strike hypothesis, as it's been said, so it's establishing a strike, a picket line, saying no to any male who is not willing to produce bride service. It will be indicated in archaeology with evidence of symbolic behavior through a cosmetics industry, an industry user of blood red pigment, fundamentally pigment that is invoking menstruation. there will be a period of time when that should start, a window of the emergence of that symbolic behavior, which will correlate to brain sizes, because it doesn't make much sense if the strategy would only start after the brain size had maxed out already, after 150,000 or so. It must happen when that big increase of brain size is beginning. So modern human encephalization is now taken back to a timeline of 300,000. So we're looking at that sort of period as when this should start. And we can say things about what will the earliest representations of supernatural potency actually look like. This wrong plus red, that the cosmologies of hunter-gatherers should emerge as lunar in relation to menstruation, lunar cosmologies, menstrual cosmologies. So we've got a lot of predictions there. I'm just going to show a little bit. So just looking at the archaeology prediction, this is the archaeological evidence that Wenger and Graeber won't necessarily talk about. We've got our modern human fossils coming from 300 to 200, 150,000. And we have this record in Africa of ochre across many African, Zambian, Kenyan, southern African sites, correlating to that emergence of. From about this point, ochre is found on every site, pretty much every rock shelter where modern humans are living and working in southern Africa. Prior to that, it's a bit more sporadic, but it's very frequently there, but it becomes almost ubiquitous. And it's the oldest durable medium that humans use, and it is the most consistent signal in that is marking the emergence of modern humans. And as modern humans eventually come out of Africa from this kind of date when they're spreading all around the world, they are taking that red ochre with them. It goes wherever they go, into Australia, into Europe, into native North America. Wherever they go, it goes. Okay. Just the last bit to say is, so this is hunter-gatherer ethnography, but the emergence, females, to create that picket line, human females are having to say no. They're having to say no to any male who is not prepared to do the work of investment and support of the women and her children. And the best way to say no is, I'm not even a female, I'm not even a human. I'm the wrong species. I'm not even female, I'm male. And this is the wrong time anyway, menstruating. So this signal of wrong and red, wrong species, wrong sex, wrong red, wrong time, is something that is part and parcel of the ritual performance of, these are Kalahari hunter-gatherers, the Twi group, where the girl is in a hut. There is first menstruation, and the women are all dancing around as in the form of elans, with a specific mating dance that is pantomiming the movements of elans. They have these sticks as horns, which are poking away any man who comes close to the hut. These are Hadza hunter-gatherers, so I've done field work on the ritual culture for female initiation with the Hadza. And these girls are invoking a matriarchal mythology of the woman with the zebra's penis, who is a woman who used to hunt zebra, shoot them and tie the penis onto her belt. So they are invoking and they are armed with their whips and sticks, and they go after the boys, the potential young lovers or mates of theirs, chasing after them for days on end in this mitochondrial ceremony, where the boys can only try to take away the weapons. Basically, these are armed bodies of women who are hunting. They are the hunters of the boys. The boys are disarmed and can't even hunt during this time period of mitochondria. So we have this symbolism of resistance being enacted with a kind of an intention that it creates primordial time, the earliest time, the first creation in the case of the Khoisan groups. Jerome, if he didn't show you any pictures on Monday, this is, of course, the Ngoku, which Jerome has documented for the Bayaka Benjele. And we can see that there's whole militant groups of women. Now, Jerome can't get any closer to this because the women who've completely taken over and dominate the village camp space, and they're doing that in militant dance formations. Again, as I say, they're not exactly armed in this case, but they're just bodies of women dominating the space. And they are shouting and calling and singing things like, old men are no good, their testicles are broken, penises produce nothing, cunts always win, and so forth. This is what their war cries are. One woman, one penis, again, is one of the war cries. Jerome has this incredible film that you must ask him to show you sometime if he wasn't able to show it on the picket line on Monday, where the Ngoku women are really appropriating male power by mimicking. They initiate the young girls by mimicking lewd and bad male behavior in ways that can only be described as carnivalesque Bactinian ways, with all kinds of working models of male genitalia, with ejaculations and all the relevant movements, and the older women are teaching the young girls about the ways men are, what men are like, and this is a kind of this is again a wrong sex. The women have their own potency as women, but they're also appropriating male potency by the appropriation of their genitalia. Now, I just wanted to say one, just talking about the Elan dances, the Elan bull dance, but I just wanted to make one point that goes back to Wenger and Graeber, because of the article they wrote. I've just said that, I've just been arguing that what is the hallmark, the signature, the sort of ritual signal of women's power is actually to fuse gender by appropriating wrong species, wrong sex, to become eland bulls in the initiation, or to become women with zebras' penises, or to actually mimic human male behavior in ways that the human males kind of keep out of sight and keep their heads down and get out of the way. And this theme is prevalent in many of the famous Venus figurines of the Upper Paleolithic, which have technical description that they are you can see these figures. You look at them one way and they are female with apparent tits and bums, and then you look at them another way and they are just obviously phallus. They're dicks, and they're being flipped between those two. And I was very in the Wenger and Graeber article, they were talking about trying to compare the possibilities of female status in Çatalhöyük, for instance, a famous village settlement where there are female figurines with looking very empowered, these kind of goddess figures, and saying that in these settlements, these Neolithic farming, early agricultural settlements, it looked like there was much more female power than, say, in Göbekli Tepe, the famous hunter-gatherer Stonehenge, where there are depictions of ferocious male animals with genitalia. But actually, my experience with, say, the Catholic Church and the iconography of the Virgin Mary and female imagery is not necessarily empowering to me or to my reproductive decisions when I was a child or when I was a young woman. Gender ambiguity, we need a theory to understand why gender ambiguity is such a powerful concept in one hunter-gatherer cosmology. This evidence of the Upper Paleolithic, again from hunter-gatherers, and it is just reductive and crass to say you see female imagery, that means female power, you see male imagery, that means male power. It doesn't work like that. So that would be just one way to finish now, because I've talked for quite a long time.